There are a variety of file formats that you need to familiarize yourself with when you're working with images in Photoshop. To simplify the number of file formats, I'm going to divide them into three areas of the workflow: the original source or capture files, your working or master file formats, which will most likely be like your multi-layered, retouched Photoshop files, and your output files, which are created for specific output devices. We'll start with image capture. So when you start with a photograph, the most common file formats are JPEG and RAW. JPEG is currently the most widely used file format in photography, and it's the default file format that most mobile devices, such as your phones, capture, and it's almost always an option for digital cameras. Its popularity is based primarily on the fact that JPEG files are really small, so you can store a large number of photos on a single device or card, and they can be written to those devices very quickly. However, in order to decrease a photograph's file size, the JPEG file format throws away information through a process called lossy compression. The quality of a JPEG file can range greatly depending on how much information is thrown away. Unfortunately, on some devices, such as mobile phones, we don't have a lot of control over the amount of compression applied to the images. On most higher-end cameras, there will be several quality levels to choose from, but you're still throwing away information. So while the highest quality setting, or the least amount of compression, might be unnoticeable to the eye in most circumstances, these files have significantly less flexibility when making adjustments such as brightening shadows or darkening highlights in an image after capture. So when given the option, I would choose not to capture in a lossy compression format like JPEG, but in a RAW format instead. Now, RAW is a generic term for a file format traditionally used to describe images that are captured by digital cameras and, more recently, mobile devices. The primary difference between JPEG and RAW files is that the RAW file formats contain all of the data that the sensor captured. RAW files still apply compression to files, but they do so using a different type of lossless compression so that the quality of the image isn't compromised. This gives RAW files significantly more flexibility when we're making those edits and enhancements to the images because there's more information to work with. Most camera manufacturers have their own proprietary RAW file formats, and because they're all written differently, the extensions for those files will be different. For example, Nikon uses .nef, and Canon uses .crw, and Sony uses .arw. But they still fall under the generic blanket term of a RAW file. The digital negative, or the DNG file format, is also another RAW file format, but it has a significant difference. It's not proprietary. The DNG format was created by Adobe with the intent of DNG becoming the archival format for all digital images. Adobe makes its file specifications available to other software developers, and not only do several camera manufacturers capture directly into the DNG format, it's also now available on several mobile devices. In addition, any RAW file from any manufacturer can be converted to the DNG file format using Lightroom, Camera Raw, or the free Adobe DNG converter. The next group of file formats are used to save what I'll refer to as working files or master edited files, and they're used when saving multiple layered documents from Photoshop, and they're the TIFF and the PSD file format. So the benefit of saving in either of these formats is that they're both available to save all of the things that you can create in Photoshop, including layers and masks, type and shape layers, smart objects and paths, and more. Although both formats use compression, it's lossless compression, so the quality of the image isn't compromised. Some people prefer to save TIFF files because TIFF is a more widely used file format and because it can save large files up to 4 gigabytes. I typically save my images as PSD, but that's only because TIFF wasn't as robust of a file format when I started working in Photoshop, but that's just a personal preference. The last group of file formats are used when it comes time to output and share your files for a specific device. In most instances, you'll want to save a derivative or a copy of your image, resize and optimize for that device. To reduce the file size, these file formats are often flattened and they compress the image, making it easier to upload or transfer the files more quickly. Exporting or saving a copy allows you to return to your working file or the master edited file if you need to make changes to individual layers or masks at a later date. When sending images to a color lab or a service bureau to be printed, it's best to ask what format they prefer. Ideally, they would request a flattened TIFF or PSD file in order to maintain the highest quality possible, but it's often faster and therefore more desirable to upload or transfer and print JPEG files. But if you do send a JPEG file, just be sure that the quality setting remains high. Now, when you're saving files to view on a screen, such as a phone or a computer, or posting online, JPEG is again the most common format because of its ability to create small files that download quickly. There are also some specialty file formats. PNG is a popular file format to save graphics for the web that require a single layer or flattened file but still need to display transparent areas. For example, the transparent areas around a round logo or maybe a button that has rounded corners. The PNG format will render smooth edges around that transparency so they won't look jagged. And it's most commonly used for graphics like a logo or more flat-looking artwork rather than a photograph. Now, the GIF or GIF file format is also a single-layered flattened file format. It has lossy compression applied to it, but in a very different way than a JPEG file. When you save as a GIF, you have to convert your file to a different color mode called index color, which only allows 256 colors. This file format is also commonly used for graphics like logos or more flat-looking artwork. Although the GIF file format supports transparency, it only supports one level of transparency, which means that if you have that circular logo, those edges are going to look jagged. But because of the GIF's ability to contain an animation within the file, today they're often used for creating ad banners or other short animations to view on screen. Photoshop also supports several popular video file formats, including .mov files, H.264, and DPX for working with audio and video in Photoshop's timeline. The Photoshop PDF file format is another specialty format, which is really convenient when you need to distribute a secure document. For example, you might need to send a client a set of images of an unannounced product, and it's critical that no one else open that document. The PDF settings enable you to password protect the file, not only from being opened, but also from being printed. All right, that wraps up this overview of the most important file formats that you'll run across when working in Photoshop and why you would choose to use one format over another.